as we speaking of which, as kind of extending this particular discussion, Charles Barkley stepped into the trans sports debate as he went on Outkick to talk about men shouldn't be able to compete in women's sports. Yeah, man. So Charles Barkley went on Outkick. Outkick is one of those right wing sports outlets where it's just it was where a lot of the people who had problems or access to grind with ESPN decided they wanted to go get their sports kick. And it's weird though, right? Because like I'm old enough to remember when they said they wanted to take their politics out of the sports, right? They wanted to watch their sports. Excuse me. They wanted to watch their sports, but they didn't want the politics involved. What it really meant was they wanted the politics. They just wanted the politics they agreed with, right? So they started coming up with their own outlets, and so here comes Outkick. Outkick is one of those publications, and so Charles Barkley ended up on this on one of their podcasts, on one of these Outkick podcasts, and they started talking about whether or not trans women or trans girls should be able to compete in sports against cisgendered women, and so. Let's see. They said Charles Barkley on Nike trans youth study. They have to be very careful with kids, right? So we'll read a bit from this article, but there's video attached to this too. So I'm gonna read a bit from the article first. It says in nearly 3 weeks since Outkick reported that evidence strongly suggested that sports apparel giant Nike funded a study on transgender youth athletes, the company has remained visibly silent about its alleged role. Perhaps Nike believes that ignoring it will make it go away. But that's not the case. The public deserve answers, and pressure is mounting on Nike to come out and explain itself. Again, like I told y'all, this is a right-wing outfit. To that end, NBA legend Charles Barkley appeared on Outkick's Don't At Me with Dan Dakich, and Dakich asked Barkley his thoughts on Nike and the study. While Barkley said he wasn't aware of the study or Nike's potential role, he made his position on the general subject quite clear. So I'm going to pull this video up, and we're going to see exactly what the fuck they even talking about here. I haven't even watched this video, but let's see what the fuck Sir Charles had to say. I reckon Charles didn't exactly say the smartest thing in the world, but we will see. Turn that sound up. All right.
I have not, but I'm gonna make this very simple for you, Dan. Men should not play sports against women. I'm not gonna get into all the shit that's going on out here in the world today. It's interesting. I always sit back and look at the stuff, and let me tell you something. I love gay people. I love transgender people. I'm against any form of discrimination. Period. Because you can't say
that when you just promoted discrimination on your very the very first thing that came out of your mouth was some discrimination shit. But okay.
Like if you are against, I love my gay friends and I love my transgender friends. But I'm not going to get into all this stuff that's going around. Men should not play sports against women. If anybody thinks that, I think they're stupid. I'm not, like I say, I support the gay community 100%. I support the transgender community 100%. But I do not under any...
If you're going to say you support somebody and then put a but at the end of that, you just you're about to invalidate every fucking thing you just said before that. Right? You don't support them 100%. You don't. Right? You putting a but like, hey, I support black people 100%, but I don't think black people are qualified to work this particular type of job. Hey, I support black people, but I don't think that black people should be, doing this sort of operating this sort of way. Like, if you have to put a but after your alleged allegiance to said group, then you don't 100% support them, right? And I get it, man. Like, this is one of those subjects. This is one of those issues where I think a lot of people just don't necessarily want to do the thought exercises. They don't necessarily want to go through all of the nuances that have to do with this particular issue. A lot of people see shit as very black and white. A lot of people confuse gender identity with sexual orientation. They don't know the difference between the two. They're not even trying to find out the difference between the two. All they know is gay, straight, and you want to be a woman or you want to be a man, but and they ain't thought no further beyond that, right? And like it's really weird when you start thinking about some of the nuances around like how we treat sports, right? Like certain sports where like women would compete against the guys, right? Like I said, when I was in high school, man, I went to a high school in Chicago that was on a city college campus. Our basketball team, the boys basketball team, we would scrimmage against the women's basketball team, for practice, right? Nobody had any, and they were good games. They were good games, right? Nobody had any motherfucking compunction about whether or not we were competing against these women or not. You didn't. Right now, I'm not saying that those women would go out and go compete against college men, but the point that I'm making is we leave room for these types of competitions all the time, right? When you look at kids of a certain age, the girls are competing against the boys in certain sports because there is no girls team for that sport. Some girls are playing back up on the boys baseball team because there may not be a softball team for the girls, right? You think about sports like tennis. Sometimes there's mixed tennis matches. Sometimes you look at golf. Sometimes they're competing in like some of the non-contact sports, things of that nature, right? But this idea that men are going into sports and deciding, hey, I suck at this as a man. I'm going to just say fuck it and become a woman so I can dominate the sport. That is not fucking happening. That is not fucking happening. But again, in much the same way like we talked about that furries thing, it's one of those things where like it's so few and far in between. It's easy for folks to feel like, yo, man, well, I guess it's okay to discriminate against these folks. Because you don't know so many of us don't know anybody that's trans. We don't come across anybody that's trans fully. And not only that, how many of us can actually point to a trans athlete that we know personally? I don't think I know any of them. I don't think many of you know any of them. Oftentimes, there's not that many of them. Like if you look at like how many, like people would talk about how many trans athletes are participating in their state, they couldn't name them. They really, and without Google, they really wouldn't know the names of the few who have made any sort of like national prominence. And they made national prominence more so infamy because of like people trying to make a statement against them. Right? Riley Gaines has basically made her career in right-wing punditry because of her tying for 5th place with Leah Thomas in swimming. Both of them were 5th place. Riley Gaines is all over the fucking place. Nobody ain't seen Leah Thomas nowhere. But Riley Gaines is a goddamn right-wing like darling. She's all over the place now. So understand, man, like when we're talking about these issues, especially when it comes to, trans issues or the LGBTQ community or even some of the more fringe furries thing, when it like this is like these Republican talking points permeating through the culture where like even people who would normally not even fuck with Republicans are like, well, yeah, that makes sense. I don't want girls playing against the boys and all that other shit. But that's only because they haven't done they haven't like looked into it more like, well, but then again, how big of a problem is this? Why are we talking about this so much? Right? I'll let this finish out a little bit.
Circumstances under is zero think that men should play sports against women. And if anybody have a problem with that, they're gonna have to get over it because I'm not gonna change I'm not gonna change. I just think it's wrong, period.
Also, that's a very telling thing too, right? I think people look at the idea of changing your mind as a weakness. And that's sad because you would think that once you come into some more information, that, hey, I thought this one thing about this, but I've come into some more knowledge. I might not necessarily have the same viewpoint or stance on this anymore. Unfortunately, like he's like, I'm not changing. Well, that's fine. Charles Barkley is an older black man. Charles Barkley is an older black man from the South. Charles Barkley is an older black man from the South who revels in some degree of not necessarily being the smartest man in the room. Charles Barkley, I mean, some of the things that we love about Charles Barkley is that Charles Barkley speaks his mind. But there's a flip side to that. And like, yo, sometimes Charles Barkley just doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And you can't convince him that he doesn't know what he's talking about, though. So you got that going on.
I'm with you. I couldn't. You said it perfectly. If somebody doesn't like it, get over it. I always say this: there's 350 million people in this country. We're going to have different opinions on shit, right? I mean, if you don't like my opinion, get over it.
And that doesn't see. I'm not one of these people. If people disagree with me, I'm good with that. Hey, we disagree.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at you.
Here's the thing, though, right? So they're talking about having a difference of opinion. There's 350 million people in America. Everybody's going to have a different opinion. That's true. However, when we start talking about difference of opinions, that is something totally different when you start talking about people's right to exist and people's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and whether or not your opinion jives or whether or not they should have that right to, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so when it comes to them talking about their opinions, it's like, yeah, you are right. You can have that opinion all day long. That's the beauty of being an American, right? However, your opinion should not supersede their right to exist. And that's where a lot of people get it fucked up. They think their opinion on shit should supersede people's right to exist and their right to pursue a life where they can exist happily. In much the same way that they would like to exist. Picture this white man who's never been discriminated against in his life talking about, well, I got a different opinion on it. Yeah, but you've never been discriminated against. And then you got someone else, Charles Barkley, who may have been discriminated against at some point, but he also enjoys a life of some privilege being a wealthy black man now. Right? Nationally recognized. Internationally known. Right? Millionaire. Beloved by millions. So there's a level of privilege that both of these dudes have. But they can't understand that their opinion on the matter helps foster a level of discrimination against a marginalized group. Not only that, a minuscule size group, which makes it easy for more people to discriminate against them. And I think that's the thing that both of these dudes is missing.
I don't hate you. I'm not going to call you names because that's just silly and stupid. But I'm never going to think it's all right for men to play sports against women. And I don't even think that's controversial. That's the thing that's funny. Like some of this stuff make, like when you see these debates on television, I'm like, yeah, men shouldn't play sports against women. I'm done. I don't want to hear you try to explain it to me. No, I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to argue with you. Men shouldn't play sports against women. I'm done. Don't try to tell me this or this or this, period.
Don't try to educate me. Right? Don't try to explain to me the nuances of what these issues are. Right? I know, and Charles, the thing about it is this, right? I know for myself, I am in the minority when it comes to this. I know this. I'm around dudes all day long. I work with dudes all day long, and this is pretty much the consensus of many of the dudes that I work with. Like they will probably echo many of the sentiments that Charles Barkley has expressed here and Dan Dakich have expressed here. Like I understand completely that I am in the minority when it comes to this, but that's also because I've listened to more than the people in my fucking immediate circle. I've tried to listen to people who have experiences outside of the one that I'm familiar with. And so, sometimes it takes you kind of going out of your comfort zone. Sometimes listening to voices that doesn't necessarily share your fucking lived experience, like trying to listen to other people's lived experience to try to understand how they got to become who they are. Like if you're not trying to even hear that, then how do you come to some level of understanding it? So when you have someone like a Charles Barkley talking about, well, yeah, men should play against women, and that's it, and he's not even trying to hear everything that goes into that. Like, come on, man. So yeah, man. Charles Barkley. Like I said, I nobody ever really accused him of being the smartest drawer, the sharpest knife in the drawer. But we love Charles because of his opinions on basketball and stuff like that. But beyond that, man, we're not listening to Charles Barkley when it comes to anything political. We're not listening to Charles Barkley when it comes to social issues. Charles Barkley has some problematic views, man, and we gotta leave it. We got to leave him there where he's at with that. But it also, like I said, it didn't like surprise me at all that he was on, Outkick expressing these opinions, because this is exactly the type of shit that you will find on Outkick. Outkick, like I said, right wing sports, sports outlet. This is kind of what they do. So you got that going on, man. Real talk. Another story we got.